right. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's 8:41, and I'll call the meeting to order. Meeting of the Carver Select Board for Monday, July 26th. This meeting is being cablecast by Area 58 Community Access Media, Channel 15, and will be posted by Area 58 on YouTube as soon as possible. There are openings on several committees. Please refer to the Select Board page on our website for a listing and application. If we could all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our community prayer. Almighty God, humbly we pray your blessing as we concern our life with the opportunity to serve our community. Enhance us with your spirit of dignity and selflessness. May we become instruments of support and understanding as we seek to bring an environment of trust and purpose among all who provide the many services that make us all that we can become. Help us achieve the goals of our commitment in this office that is now our responsibility. And especially, we lift our prayers for all the citizens of our community that have been allowed to serve, that they discover the fullness and joy of life that we all seek, and keep those serving in our armed forces and our first responders in our hearts and thoughts. Amen. All right. The first item on our agenda this morning is a discussion and possible vote on the establishment of a technical review fund for the Route 44 Urban Renewal Project. Mr. LaFond.
This, what you have in front of you, is a one-page that has the red print. This is the request that was made by Bob the other evening. I, again, wanted to pass this out separately, so just to highlight for you the difference. I believe the motion last time was to approve this subject to any final recommendations of town council. Bob had asked for this to be included in addition to that. So.
And it just this is a red line change on item number 5, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, correct. Page 2, item number 5. As an aside, there's also an agreement of similar nature that has been drafted for the RDA. That's, you know, that's their business, but for the boards, from the standpoint of the select board, this is the request that was made by Bob. And other than that, the proponent is very antsy to get moving here with the fire department.
Okay. Discussion?
Question. The number 5, the initial deposit, is that for solely the fire department to use that $20,000? Because it doesn't explicitly say for the sole use.
No, it's not the sole use. Initially, we were looking at an agreement that was specific to the fire department. Town council recommended that we have an agreement that's more broad, that could be used by any department, subject to the approval of the select board. So the $20,000, although at this moment there's no reason to apply that to any other department other than the fire department. It's a broader agreement. $20,000 is for the entire agreement, keeping in mind that the RDA is going to have their own account with their own deposit necessary for their own needs.
So then when it says the initial deposit may be used by the town for the retaining services of the fire, that covers everybody else too?
That is correct.
They're not going to be able to challenge, say, well, it says that may be used? I know the word may is, you know.
No, this was worked out between council and their council, so it's very clear to the parties.
And then my other question, number 13, it had a fill in the blank on my copy. All notices required by this agreement shall be delivered to the developer by addressing it to line.
Yes, that will be filled in today when I have a conversation with Mr. Utsi, who is the gentleman who's dealing with this for the proponent.
Okay, so we know it goes on that line.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Belbin, did you have a?
Yeah, two things is that shouldn't this be filled out of the town of Carver and whatever company we're doing it, if it's Hillwood or it's the law firm in front of them or whatnot, that there is a put in there?
What page you on, Bob?
Huh?
What
Just
page?
just the first agreement between blank, Massachusetts.
Very top of the first page.
First one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the address of whoever we're dealing with should really be in there. I mean,
All right.
just my, that's my comment.
Yep.
And then, the other thing to go on with the money thing, that's just a starting. I mean, if planning board says that we need more money to hire somebody, then we can always say, hey, we need to increase this because of these costs for the planning board or zoning or conservation or something like that, correct?
Right, but yes, the planning board has their own ongoing technical review account. So this would be in addition to that. The $20,000, once there's a cost incurred by the town, that is presented to Hillwood, and they will reimburse that so that the $20,000 is always in place.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Hewens?
Yeah, I think that everyone's concerns are answered in number 6, as well as in number 9. And number 6 refers to, in connection with its review of applications and other submittals, if any other board, commission, or committee needs the money, all they have to do is ask us, and the developer will do it. And then number 9 says, that they'll provide these additional funds to replenish the account within 10 days of written request. So, to Bob's point, that 20 grand should always be in there, the way this reads. That's the way I'm reading it.
One more thing. Mr. Chair.
Yes. Ms.
About number 6, kind of in line, Sarah, you said all they have to do is ask us, but in number 6, it says we have to tell the developer what we want to do and why and who we're going to use. And I understand the intent, but I think we're going to be giving them a lot of good faith doing what they are. This project, the proposed project is huge. And this is so massive to the town that, in my opinion, I just don't like the idea of having to basically ask them for permission to use.
Well, number 8 says the developer shall provide the town's treasurer with the sum identified in the notice of designation, and said sum will be deposited into the account.
But they have the right to appeal who we want to use, and I just
Well, I
don't like
think
that they get
that's-
any,
That's probably comes from council. They probably have the right to appeal.
I just don't like the idea of them being able to say, no, we don't want you to use that person at all.
And I
We
believe
don't-
their
we
right
don't
to
have to-
appeal is to us.
To us.
Yeah,
Yes.
This is where they come. So if they have an issue with one of the
and we can say
issues,
no.
we're the ones they appeal to.
Okay,
Yeah, they don't have any, there's no legal, yeah, they're not gonna be going to court.
okay,
Yeah, this is the board that decides those requests, and also the board that determines what other departments, other than the fire department, can utilize this technical review account. And they don't have an option. They do have a right, if you look at the bottom of 6, to comment on scope, but they don't have, that's solely within the jurisdiction of the select board.
okay, so they can't say,
That's the first sentence in number
They
7.
can merely comment.
The developer may take an administrative appeal from the selection of the outside consultant
Right.
to the select board.
Right,
So
so-
that comes to us.
so they can't say, no, we don't like that person to an outside entity, and they can tell the town no. They say, we don't like that person to us, and
No, that's
then the
at our-
select board,
That's at our discretion.
Good.
And again, the scope of services, they have a right to review and comment, but, which could be helpful to the town, but they don't have a right in any fashion to influence this board any more than board's willing to be influenced.
great.
Yeah.
Mr. Hoffman?
One, Jen, one of the questions you had asked, number 2, I think helps that a little bit too. It's about the funds may be used from the town time to time in its sole direction. So it lists other options as well, not just the fire.
Good.
Kind of the same question.
And
That's,
And it's the town's sole discretion as
Right.
well, so.
I just want to make sure that
yep,
they can't, we're going to be doing a lot in good faith with this proposed project, so,
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not all under one line. There's several lines of where the funds can be used.
well, as long as that's backup for us, that's good, but,
And keeping in mind, this is I'm sure a fairly standard technical review agreement by KP Law that is tailored for this specific occasion. But this is, again, pretty tight, as it's probably been in place, and probably in some fashion for a generation now.
And also, Ms. Bogart, to your concern about number 13, the line being blank.
Yes.
That's addressed in number 12. If you look at number 12, just prior to it,
Yeah,
it
multiple.
talks about sending it to the town administrator at the Carver Town Hall with the
no,
address.
it says delivered to the developer by addressing it to,
Oh, the developer, okay.
so,
Yeah.
like Bob, I don't like blanks.
No.
So And I had a question. So on the first line, the agreements between, is it Hillwood? Is that going to be the?
Correct. It will be held with the developer, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Anything else?
I'll make a motion, we approve the agreement
I'll second it.
with the changes,
With the red line change?
with the red line change.
And running it by council.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. All right. The next item is an update on the Plymouth Street water line in compliance with the administrative consent order. Mr. LaFond.
I would
And
ask
Mr. Forg, if you'd like to come up and join us. And this is just an update to the board. This line item comes from a call I received from a representative of the DEP last Wednesday, I believe. So, Mr. LaFond, would you like to?
Yes, Mark had, Mr. Townsend had called me last week that he received a call from Angela Gallagher at DEP stating that the town was not in compliance with the administrative consent order, essentially due to contention that the town by April 30th had not gone out and received bids for all the services necessary. The town did have the bid in place. In fact, the project is completed as required by the administrative consent order. At the moment, Kevin is doing research, has gotten some informal bids for the purposes of determining how much and how we're going to procure the services necessary to bring those lines to the houses and to have them hooked up, plumbing inside the house. It's almost, well, it is. It's impossible to do what is being suggested by DEP for a couple of reasons. Number one, we don't know how many of these homes are going to choose to tie in. There would have been more information available to the public had DEP showed up for the meeting. So needless to say, I'm not very pleased about that. Second of all, until we know how many homes are going to tie in, we don't know what we're actually procuring. And we don't even know what type of procurement we need, because those thresholds are very important to make sure we do a proper procurement. Kevin has been doing some research. He's been working with our engineering firm, and I don't want to speak for you, Kevin, but our engineer is quite upset, confused. Would that be? In addition to that, and I'm sure Kevin will say this, Kevin has made multiple calls to our DEP rep that have not been returned, and I have a call into somebody of a higher rank at DEP to make sure that get this straightened out. So. Kevin?
I think the issue here is there is kind of a cloud over whether or not the town has met their obligation to the administrative consent order. I think that based upon the discussions that took place and the development of this ACO, that everybody looked at this project as a waterline project. And up until Wednesday, I was feeling really good about this project because we were complete and we were 3 months ahead of the deadline of November 30th. So it goes back to the issue of what are we actually looking in terms of an estimate or a bid. That is still kind of up in the air. That being said, I have actually got an estimate from Larry Page. Larry Page is a friend of mine, he's a contractor, and I asked him, can you do me and the town a favor and just go out there, go to every home, excuse me, go to every home, determine each individual home hookup cost that is on the list that I gave him. There's 19 homes, and he's provided me with that estimate. That wasn't a formal bid process. That was just do me a favor. And where we are right now is that we need input from DEP, our engineer, and a second meeting coming up hopefully by mid-August with all of the residents when I have more information to present to them to get a final number as to who is gonna tie in and who isn't. And there are basically 3 levels here. There are 19 homes affected. Of those 19 homes, there are 5 they are well within the groundwater flow mapping that the engineer and the geohydrologist have done. And quite honestly, they really don't have a choice. They have to be tied in. Then the second tier are those people that are somewhat outside of the plume, but close, and have not had a detection. And so they're kind of like middle ground, so they may or may not choose to tie in. Some of them, if they have to decommission their well, and they're using the well for irrigation, they don't feel that they're at risk, they may choose not to. And then there's the third tier, and those people are clearly outside of the potential groundwater, the groundwater flow. And this is all, the groundwater flow is based upon the study that the geohydrologist and the engineer have done. And it's, I don't know as if it's been published yet to DEP, but it's part of their reporting process to DEP. So that third tier are those people that are completely outside of that groundwater flow direction. And they've taken part in that testing process and have never had a detection. So those people are really, by all of those things, are outside of the risk, and they may choose not to. But where this all goes to is that.
And I'm sorry, but of the 19, there's 12 of those.
12 of them.
So that's obviously a significant piece of the pie here that if we're going to do a procurement, we have to know that.
So going forward, my thought was by mid-August, have a second meeting with the residents. By the end of August, ask for a commitment to tying in or just declining the tie-in. Now, at that point, we have the exact number that we're dealing with, and it's going to determine what type of bid process we have to go through. And you know, we still have, at that point, we still have 2 months to do the hookups and the interior plumbing. So, again, I go back to the original statement, and that is that myself, former town administrator, current town administrator, the engineer that's overseeing this job, the geohydrologist that's seeing this job, have all interpreted this as being a waterline project, period. And so I just say that for emphasis because I don't know why DEP made that statement. I don't know if she went rogue. I don't know if this is a collective effort within people, with people within DEP, and she was the one that had to make the call. But at this point, I don't think any of us know how we need to react.
Well, so
I'm sorry.
just a couple of things, so everyone knows exactly where we are in the administrative consent order you have in front of you. We're specifically talking about on page 5, item 8, Article E. Mm-hmm. And when I spoke to Ms. Gallagher last week, I was very clear to her that obviously this is a project that was very important to the town and obviously very important to the board. It's been on each and every one of our agendas for, months. So I made it very clear to her that our desire is to comply with the administrative consent order. And obviously, if there's some miscommunication, we'll deal with that. I think between my conversation and today, Kevin, you have made multiple attempts to get hold of these folks, right, to get some clarification?
Well, I called her Thursday morning, and I did not receive a call back either Thursday or Friday. Okay. But can I
absolutely.
Just one other point. Number 8 on page 5 reads, the town shall extend its public water supply line to properties located at 162, 164, 165 Plymouth Street. So, I mean, that sentence alone speaks to the project. And the project is to extend the water line. The town went beyond that for a number of reasons, but we're providing water to people on Hines Ave and Captain Perkins and further up Plymouth Street. So I don't know how you can read that statement and then what follows and not come to the conclusion that the ACO is for the water line. But all that being said, the town, right from the beginning, realized that you're not just going to put a water line up and walk away. The town's responsibility goes beyond that. And there's no argument there. Because we all know that that's the whole purpose of this.
Oh.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr.
I just wanted to add on page 5, number 8, I think the letter G is really, is proof to what you're saying, Mr. Forg, because it says by November 30th, subject to appropriations of funds, complete the water line project up to the service point of each dwelling in Area A. So, okay, we haven't done that part yet, but we have until November 30th.
And we're on, that's what
And we're
we've all
doing
been
it.
operating under.
That's right, and we're doing it, and we need more input from DEP. If they're gonna require us to do it to all 19 homes, or just the 5, or the 12 in addition, we don't know, because they're not telling us. But we still have till November 30th to complete it up to the service point in each dwelling.
That's right.
To your point regarding DEP and whether they're going to require tie-ins or not, DEP is not going to give specific direction. They're going to say, this is what we would like to see, but they're going to punt back to the town and say, however, the town makes the ultimate decision as to how that's done. And
Okay.
who needs it.
Mr. Belbin, then Mr. LaFond.
All right. I've been extremely frustrated with this because I said this before, say it again. We should have had meetings well in advance with the residents, well in advance before the line got built, to know how many people are going to tie into our water line going in there. Okay? It was dismissed, and I'm frustrated that it's gotten to this point, and I have to disagree because it says the town shall extend the public water line to the properties located at 162, 164, and 165. Number A, and this is what I got out of the communication, is that all permits necessary to complete the water main extension. Well, what is that? My feeling is they're telling us we have to provide water to these places by November 30th, but all our permits need to be gotten by August 30th. So that's where I don't understand, all right? And then characterizing A in the, that's something else. But we have until August 30th to get all the permits. Well, here we are in July. We haven't had a meeting with the residents to say, are you going to hook up or not?
Yes, we have.
Yep. And we
Do we
have
know,
all the
do we
permits.
know every person on that street that's gonna get hooked up? Do we have an agreement with them, they're gonna get hooked up, signed agreement?
No, we don't.
That's what we need.
And on the June 30th meeting, if I can, Mr. Chairman, on the June 30th meeting, when DEP did not show up, and their purpose for showing up was to provide information to the residents so that they could make a decision as to whether or not they were gonna tie in.
Yeah.
When on that night, I said, just so I have an idea, can I just have a show of hands from the audience as to who would like to tie in to the water? Who is preparing to tie into the water? And they all said, almost in unison, well, how the hell are you gonna do that? We don't know anything about this. We don't know if we have to, we don't know. So, to your point, Bob, even if I were to have that meeting with them today, I still don't have a count.
And that's my problem that I have, is that we should have had meetings with the residents long in advance. We knew this was coming, all right? We should have known beforehand so we could get all the permits we needed.
Couldn't be done. Couldn't be done because.
We had months and months and
Well,
months.
keep in mind that we need feedback from DEP. DEP has not provided the feedback that we need or the residents need specific to their private wells and what use they may have after the fact. We may have 12 residents who don't have to decommission wells, they can continue to use them for drinking water, or they could at least use them for irrigation. We've been looking for that guidance from DEP for months.
And let's point out,
the
that guidance has
residents-
changed. At one point, they were saying that everyone was going to have to decommission their wells.
said,
And
correct.
now that has changed.
That's correct,
So,
yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Belvin.
With the decommissioning of wells, the history that I know is that if your property has tested positive for this, then you have to just decommission your well. All right, there was one well on one of the other streets there that they had town water, and they were using their well to irrigate their vegetable garden. They were mandated to close that up, and it happened. Okay, so we know that at a minimum is, if you're one of those people that got to tie in, they're 5 right now, those 5, they have to decommission their wells. We know that for a fact. The other ones and that's there, we know that. The other ones there that haven't tested positive or whatnot, yeah, that is okay, maybe. But no matter what, we know we have to bring it over to those 5 people. At a minimum, we should have got all the permits for those houses that we know needed to be done. At a minimum. And I think we would have been fine, but we haven't. And
We are not in violation of that date, and I don't know what permits are even necessary at this point to bring those to private residences. The problem here is that until we know how many people are gonna hook up, we're not gonna do a bid for 5 extensions. If we're gonna have 9 or 10 or 11, we're gonna do one procurement for all of those. It just doesn't make sense to do this piecemeal. It doesn't make good financial sense. We do have a number that's been appropriated over and above the water line. We obviously want to stay within that. DEP has given no legitimate guidance to the town or to residents from what Kevin is saying, and I think Mr. Haskell at Langdon, they're probably not going to give us that guidance. The other pieces I want to say, even though I think there's a very good argument that the consent order is for the water line. Certainly there's an implication in a good faith effort by the town to ensure that any of those 19 who wish to hook up do so. In fact, we went out of our way to move some money around in our expenditure plan for town meeting to make sure that we had the funds to do that. I think that was beyond what was required of the town. This project is way ahead of schedule. Quite frankly, I think we deserve some credit for moving this along, and I give Kevin a lot of credit for moving this along so expeditiously. And as Kevin said, you don't know what kind of a procurement you need to do for tie-ins until you know who's going to tie in. That's when you do a procurement. If we do a procurement for 5, and as it turns out there's 19, well, now we're bid splitting. Okay, now I don't know that DEP understands the procurement laws of this state, but we do. And bid splitting's illegal. So we need to know who's going to tie in. People need guidance in terms of what they're going to have to do, what their options are with their wells. And until that happens, we're not in a position to do anything here. And the suggestion by DEP that we had to have bids in place by April 30th it's nonsensical.
Well, it says that the bids for the actual hookup to point of service
Well,
isn't
I
due till
think
November.
that, and Mr. Townsend, you can correct me, I think that the point that Angela Gallagher made to you was implying that we didn't have all, the violation that was cited was not having all our bids completed by April 30th.
Yes, I think her point was we should have all bids, not just the bids for the water line, but all bids.
Right, so that's the contention. So to that contention, there's no way that could have even happened.
Right.
And for her to be calling you, no offense, Mr. Townsend, but Kevin has been the point of contact, either him or Bruce Haskell at Langdon, for what, a couple of years now? So, yes, that's somewhat disappointing, and quite frankly, it makes me rather angry.
And I agree, and I was quite clear when I spoke to her that a representative for the town, either yourself or Mr. Forg, would get back to her, and obviously she hasn't. That communication hasn't happened. We've tried, and
Yeah, point out as well that it was to her cell phone, not to the office.
Yeah.
So, but I'd like to expand a little bit on the issue of whether the residents are tying in or not. Quite simply, they need more education at this point. And so that's gonna come in the form of the guidance letter that was sent by DEP that said, this is kind of what we'd like to do, this is what our suggestions are, but ultimately the town makes the decision. There is also a study that's been done that created that contour map, groundwater contour map, and that has been completed within the last couple of weeks. So, looking ahead to the future, when we have that meeting around mid-August, all of the residents are going to be invited to a second follow-up meeting. At that meeting, hopefully we'll have DEP there. Hopefully we'll have, not hopefully, but we'll have Bruce Haskell and the hydrogeologist to do their best to explain the kind of like a risk assessment, if you will, that all the homes are in. They'll be very clear as to the ones that absolutely, without question have to be tied in, those that are on that fringe, and those that are clearly outside of it. At that point, the people have enough education related to their own water supply as to whether or not they're going to tie in or not. Now, everybody's different, so, out of those 19, you may have all 19. Say, yeah, we're gonna tie in, you may have half of those. Any number is possible. But if it's, let's say it's only 4 or 5, we're probably under the procurement process that is difficult. It might just be simply you can select it. To put it in perspective, I have an estimate for all 19 homes that's under $50,000. So if it's only 4 homes, you may be able to do 4 or 5 homes. You may be able to just say, contractor A, you can do the job, and you don't have to go through any type of bid process.
Mr. Ford, so is that's a bid to connect the water from the street to all 19 homes, and all 19 are under $50,000?
Right.
And that would also.
That's one contract.
Okay.
That's
And does that?
Well, the other piece would be for the internal plumbing required. And
Well, that was my question. So that's to bring the water from the street to the home, but that's not to bring the water from wherever it connects to the home to their faucet. That's a separate.
Yeah, and there's a specific way that needs to be done as well, because if you think about it, especially some of the homes on the side streets, Captain Perkins, some of those homes are 150 feet off the road.
Yeah.
And some of them have really nice landscaped areas. So once the contractor is chosen, the process is going to be that each individual home is going to be visited with the contractor. We're going to ask to get into their basement, find out where that water line comes in to the basement from the well. That's the route that we're going to choose to get to that property or to that home, because you don't want to get into this corner of the house and realize you have to bring that interior plumbing back to where it enters the house. So there's a very specific way that all has to be carried out. And then once that's done, so that second portion of the work brings the water line, the service water line, the 1-inch line from the water main to the house. They actually core the foundation. So when that contractor leaves, there's a stub inside the house in the basement for a plumber to come in and make the necessary connections. It's a lot cheaper to make a circuitous route to a home with a trench and water line than it is to try to go through finished basements and things like that with a plumber. It's just, so it's all planned out. It's just that we don't know who and how many.
And obviously, once we get the water to the homes, then the plumber would have to go inside and give individual, estimates on each. I have to think each individual house is going to be different, and obviously, there's no way we could give those bids until we know who wants the water.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, so if I'm hearing you right, Kevin, if DEP isn't going to give us any further guidance, we're just going to meet with the residents again and the engineers and the hydrogeologist in the middle of August And the resident, we're going to have to decide which of the residents are going to get the water, and that'll be that. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't want to exclude DEP.
Mhm.
I mean,
If they don't
my
show up
goal is to
again.
have DEP here to, basically to show their support of what the town is planning on doing.
I'm just assuming supposing they don't show up, because they didn't last
If they
time.
don't show up, then, they have put it back on the town.
Yeah.
Mr. Hoffman, then Mr. Belvin.
All right, I have a couple of questions. First, so on line 8, where it says the town shall extend its public water supply to the properties located at 162, 164, and 165. So that's the consent order that was given to the town. So now we're saying that it's going from these three houses to 5 so that should be updated, correct?
Well,
And
actually, the water line, it's the public water supply line has been extended to 19 homes.
Okay. Right, and I guess that's my second question. So there's some confusion in my mind, at least, and I'm sure other people's. So we have a water line, we have the water line project, we have public water supply line, and then now we're talking about the water hookups.
Yeah. So this project is a water line extension, as I read this. You are to bring the water line, or extend the water line to these 3 homes. But as the testing was extended to the different homes, we brought, now said, well, part of the testing process, we're gonna bring the water line, extend the water line up 58, I'm sorry, up from the street, and also Captain Perkins and Hines Ave. So what is in the ground right now is a water main, which is an 8-inch water line, with all of the curb stops. In other words, you have a water line, and then you have a tap into that water line, and then you have what is called a curb stop. So it goes from the water line to the property line of each property along the route of the water line.
All 19 homes.
All 19 homes.
Okay.
So the reason that's done that way is that you don't want to continually go back into the street, tap into the water main. You're putting the water main in, you might as well put in the potential service line, or it's called the curb stop. It's just tap into the water main, run it to the property line, and then ultimately the service water line is that 1-inch line that goes from the curb stop to the homes.
Okay.
Okay?
And I think, Mr. Hoffman, I think to that point, if you look at the ACO, we have gone multiple times beyond what's required. I mean, never mind the 3 homes, we've made an internal decision that at a minimum, those 5 homes would be tied in. Although it's very possible even those other 2 may not want to be. And we've provided for curb stops and an appropriation to hook up all those 19 homes from the water main all the way to the plumbing within their homes. So we have gone well beyond what's required of us. So, which is one of the reasons why this is so concerning. Obviously, to the extent that, and again, no offense, Mr. Townsend, the members of the board are getting calls from DEP, and obviously, members of this board are going to, are subject to getting calls from your constituents, and I don't think that's fair when we haven't had a chance to get some information, do some review, and then provide that information to you. That's not fair. So,
Mr. Belvin.
Yeah, in the email that was sent out, we're in violation by April 30th, 2021, subject to appropriation of funds, which we've already done that, award such bid or bids. And I think that's the issue that DEP is looking at, is that we haven't got any bids to at least, at a minimum, those 3 houses to hook them up. And we haven't. So,
again, as I mentioned, Bob, it makes no sense to get bids for 3 homes if we're ultimately going to be tying in 10 or 12 homes. Is once again, now we're bidding twice. We're potentially bid splitting. and we have till November 30th. If you don't know what you're bidding, logistically, you can't bid. And to suggest that those types of, that procurement was subject to an April 30th deadline, when it's, you can read this and very, in my mind, clearly discern that the town is only required to do the water line. So the bids were in place for the water line. But again, that being said, we want to make sure that we're in compliance. We want to make sure we're working in good faith with DEP and working in good faith with the residents. The problem is we don't get appropriate communication from DEP until a call to the chairman of the board at midnight. That's inappropriate. It's inappropriate. We can't deal with that effectively.
Well,
So as I said, I don't mean to be
One
critical of
more.
DEP. but-
Please. I disagree wholeheartedly. I feel that we should have done more. I think we should have turned around and had these meetings last year with the residents to let them know we're gonna put a water line in. We need to know who's gonna come in. I mean, that's my feeling, that we should have done that. And we didn't do that. And I understand we're gonna do this piecemeal, and this is my issue that I have, is that we're doing it piecemeal, is, well, we'll do this, and then we'll get to the other stuff after, and then we piecemeal it again. I think that's wrong. I think how this was handled was wrong, and that's my opinion. But we have no control over what the DEP is gonna do. So if
and
they're
I-
gonna come after us with a fine, they come after us fine. We have an old town administrator that said he would pay for it, so.
Well,
We-
I appreciate your thoughts, Bob, I really do, but as we stated, without some guidance from DEP, the town, neither the town nor these residents were in a position to make that decision a year ago. We don't even have guidance now from DEP, and they know that this is a very important issue, what people are gonna do with their wells. So, again, I appreciate your point, but I do contend that we've done what we can in a timely manner, and we're doing it shooting blind without assistance from the enforcement agency, meaning DEP.
Mr. LaFawn, can you just get a little bit of clarification, just so I'm clear? So when you talk about a split bid, are you saying that the town cannot go out and seek bids for extending the water from the street to the homes for the houses that have to get the water? Not the houses that may choose or may not choose to get the water, but the houses that have to have the water. We can't do bids for those houses and then do a separate bid for any other houses that may choose to connect to the water line after a meeting?
That was a question that I think we would pose to the Inspector General's office if necessary, but I would say, though, that typically, if you're gonna have two bids for the same thing, that's, so that you don't have to proceed through a particular procurement process. For instance, if we're doing 50,000, if the hookups, ultimately, people decide that number of people, and we do estimates, and we realize that it's probably gonna be more than $50,000, well, that puts us in a particular procurement category threshold. If we do 5, and then we do 10, and now we're over 50,000 between them, again, that's bid splitting. And again, I think we would need, direction from Inspector General and DEP as to whether or not that would be the case. But even beyond that, though, it just doesn't make economic sense not to do this all at once, and we are well in advance of the timeline for our requirement to do it. So, we have to assume that the town would expect us to have good business sense, too, as we go along.
I understand that I'm not a procurement law specialist, but there's a sort of a bottom line to this whole thing, and the bottom line is that the DEP is suggesting that we are not in compliance with the order. And I think clearly the will of this board for as long as I can remember has been to be in compliance with this order. So I think we need to really put a priority in getting hold of DEP and finding out is there some miscommunication or is there not miscommunication. If there is, then that's fine and we'll deal with it. If there's not, then we need to circle back and do whatever we can to be in compliance with this order. And if that means we have to do some separate bids, maybe we need to seek, appropriate permission to do those separate bids. And I think we need to do whatever we can to be in compliance with the order.
And I will, between Kevin and I, we will get the best answers we can and report that back to the board. As I mentioned, as Kevin mentioned, he has calls into Ms. Gallagher at DEP. Obviously, the engineering firm is working that from their own angle, and I have a request into someone at a upper management level at DEP. So between us, I'm sure we'll be able to get you some better information in hopefully a timely fashion.
Okay. Ms. Bogart?
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm clear. The 5 homes that seem to be affected, do we have confirmation in writing from DEP or another legal source that they do have to be hooked up and have to decommission their wells? Do we have non-negotiable has to happen?
No.
Okay, so then I'm assuming we also don't have that for the rest of the homes.
Right.
Where can we get that in writing to know for sure? So then the residents can know for sure, legally, definitely you have to, or you have the option. How can we do that? That's step 1, I think.
Well, the consent order tells us this is the legal document that tells us at a minimum what we need to do. There are 3 homes on there. So that's all the DEP is requiring, period. Beyond that, I think it's a good faith attempt on the town to determine who wishes to tie in. That's well beyond what the legal requirements are for the town. And if you're a resident and you don't know what your requirements will be or what your ability is going to be to maintain your well, either, for irrigation purposes, you're not in a position to make a decision. We need those residents to be in a position to make a decision. We don't have the information here to do that. Residents don't have that input either. So that's what we've been waiting for from DEP for quite some time. And as Kevin mentioned, they're probably just gonna, punt.
Right, because kind of where I'm at right now is, first step, we have to legally find out who has to go and who has to decommission their well, because then it's clear to the homeowner.
Right, that's in the
and to us. Okay, so, because I'm seeing this, and this is kind of where I was going. So if there's those 3 homes that must do that, then I think we should find out legally the other homes. And then once we have that information, so there's no confusion, send out a letter similar to this with a date of we are having a resident meeting this day. Send it certified mail so we know everybody got it. At that time, and maybe on that same letter, have a deadline set for you need to agree or sign something in writing by, if the meeting is, we'll just say August 15th because it says mid-August. So we have that meeting. Then by August 30th, you need to officially sign something stating you will be hooking up and decommissioning your well or you will not. And then that gives us what we need, because I just think it's still kind of too, for lack of an official term, wishy-washy, this is what's going on. But I think if we set steadfast dates so people know this is the meeting, this is the deadline, but first we need to know what do you need to do. Because even if things are being done in good faith, in my opinion, that's the way to do it. Let's actually set deadlines and let's really get the ball rolling. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair. To your point, the June 30th meeting was an attempt and a step toward doing everything you're saying. In other words, DEP was supposed to be present. They were supposed to be there to give their guidance, their thoughts, and everything else, coupled with what the engineers could provide. So that didn't take place. Unfortunately, it didn't show up that way. And that was not the sole purpose of the meeting, but pretty much the bulk of that meeting was going to be Q&A with DEP officials so that the residents could make an informed decision as to what they were going to do. To ask them, and I think your idea is great, but to ask them for that commitment, as we currently sit here, no one's going to make that decision, because that's why going forward, I'm trying to have another meeting, have DEP present, have the engineers present, and then at that point, then set a drop dead date, so to speak, when they have to make that decision. But right now, they do not have enough information to make that decision.
So then what happens if another meeting's set up and DEP doesn't come? This just,
Then they're gonna have to make a decision based upon what they hear from the town's engineer.
well, that's kind of where I'm getting. Let's,
That's what they'll have to do.
That's
if
what
we
they're
were
saying.
given deadlines, let's keep up with that. Let's set deadlines for ourselves.
I think that's what we're doing.
Well, I don't see a specific date on here, so I just wanted to take it for, this is exactly what I was going to say, but with specific dates. And a lot of that hinges on getting in writing what each resident is required to do, if anything. Because that takes out any sort of confusion to any homeowner that would be affected. Is just have set deadlines and set guidance, and we can't control DEP, but let's, you know,
Mr. Hoffman.
So, on this next meeting, are we prepared to offer, or to answer questions for the homeowners if DEP doesn't show up?
Yes.
So we will,
Yes.
okay.
We'll have Bruce Haskell from Langland Environmental, and Luke Fabry, who is the geohydrologist. They had they came to a meeting, I'm gonna say it might have been a year ago, and they did an extremely good job. They were able to explain a lot of things.
Excuse me, not to interrupt, who is that meeting with?
That meeting was with the residents on Plymouth Street,
Okay.
as it related to the landfill and water. I think it's got also water. But they do a very good job in explaining some very technical data. Luke Fabry in particular, the geohydrologist, does a great job. So, a long way of answering your question, absolutely, there'll be somebody here. They'll have a lot more information than they do right now.
Okay, because I agree with Bob. I'm kind of disappointed that the town, those residents weren't met with earlier. For whatever reasons, fine, it's all in the past, but like Jen said, from now on, we have to set this guideline. Because again, I think it's kind of interesting that the consent order only has 3 homes, so technically we could just take care of these 3 homes and be covered by the consent, but it's like, no, there's more homes involved.
Yeah.
So I think we're doing due diligence, and
Yeah.
better for the town to do that. But again, like Bob had said before, these 3, we have to take care of, technically these 3, now it's 5. And like what Mr. Townsend had asked about, if we took care of the 5 in one shot, and then potentially the next 14 in another bid.
And I would just point out too, that we have till the end of November to do this.
Yeah.
So we have plenty of time here, you know, to determine, you know, the most economic way to do that. It may very well be that we're doing them all at once. It may very well be that maybe that's what we're doing, Jim, if there's a lack of knowledge.
Mr. LaFond, if I could, we're under the impression we have till the end of November to do this.
That's correct.
But DEP is suggesting that we should have already had those bids. So I think we need to put a priority in clearing that up and finding out. And I know, Ms. Bubes, you
I was just going to say, I think Mr. LaFawn said that to find out whether or not we could even do the first 5, and then whoever else, he'd have to talk with the Inspector General's office? Is that
Right, I think I suggest that
Because
that's
we
what
want
we
to
need
do
to
the
find out.
legal thing when it comes to procurement as well. Yeah.
Chairman,
Mr. Belvin.
wait till they. All right, so to kind of move this along, I'd like to make a motion that we have town council draw up 2 different agreements. One that will cover the residents who want to hook up or who have to hook up to the water line and decommission their wells. Okay, so those 5 houses. Okay, a separate agreement for houses that wish to hook up, all right, and not decommission their wells. okay? And then another one that says that I don't want to hook up to this water line. I think that we have those available to us as soon as possible, so that we can bring those to the residents. And I think that's something that we're pushing forward to this, because if we're just waiting for somebody to do something, I'm done waiting. I want this done. So we need to have these agreements in place so we can give them to the residents, say, which one do you want to do? Okay, and if you don't want to do anything, fine, sign this paper here, okay, and then let whatever happens in the future. But we need to turn around and make sure our liability is taken care of as quick as possible, and these agreements need to be done. So that's my motion.
I second that.
And for discussion purposes, I would agree that we need to have some clarity from the residents. And the town's liability needs to be cleared, because we can't be testing, you know, let's say 5 people hook up. We can't be testing 12 wells indefinitely, so people can make a decision later on. I think we need to draw that line, and we have to know people who decide they're not going to hook up, they have to understand we're not going to be testing their wells anymore either. So,
I guess my only question about the motion is, do we know for sure that those 5 houses have to decommission their wells? Because that seems to have gone back and forth. Mr. Belden.
From past practice, the DEP has required you to decommission your well. Okay, so common sense would have it that if you test positive for this, and you got to decommission your well, okay? And if you don't, then it's up to the DEP to go after these people, because that's my feeling.
I understand. It just seems to me that we're getting a little fuzzy guidance from DEP on that. Mr. Forg, do you have any?
No.
No, and I think the problem, Bob, is that we can't, the town's willing to, obviously is going to pay for and provide the service to decommission people's wells, but we can't do that without the permission of these homeowners. We can't go on people's properties and do these things without their permission. So
That's what this agreement that I put in as a motion and was seconded, that's the purpose. The purpose is to say that we have the right to go do this, okay?
Right.
And that they sign over those rights with this document, all right? Because we know that that the DEP is not going to allow us to hook up someone's house for water and allow them to keep a contaminated well available to be used for irrigation, because basically you're spreading that contamination back in through the water,
Well, actually,
through the soil and down. So
I agree, but DEP needs to tell the residents that.
yeah, and
we need
if I may,
to tell the residents that this is what happened.
We don't make that legal, we don't
That's
make that decision for residents what we're gonna do on their property. They need to be told that by DEP.
and
Ms.
if I may, there is a home on Lakenham Drive that receives town water, whose well is also used for irrigating their lawn. So, I mean, that has happened. I know that I would like guidance from DEP before if I were one of those homeowners, before I knew whether or not I'd sign anything. So.
Mr. Hoffman.
So in discussion for Bob's motion, DEP has officially come out with 3 homes.
Mm-hmm.
We're now saying there's 5 homes.
Mm-hmm.
Will DEP agree that it's 5 homes? Or are they still sticking with the 3 that have to get hooked up to the water line? Because I'm just wondering why, so legally, so if we do, get those contracts that Bob wanted, is it 3 or is it 5 that have to? We're in, part A of Bob's 3-prong contract.
But if I may.
Mr. Ford.
I think the answer to the question is that there are 3 homes that are subject to the ACO.
Right.
Right? But if you're a home that is going to be receiving the water, and you've tested positive, DEP will weigh in on those homes as well.
So I guess what's the difference? The 3, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt. So the 3 that are listed here, they tested positive, correct?
They were the 3 that tested positive at the time the ACO was.
And this was May, and this was like 2020,
Yeah.
May or
Right.
May.
Right.
And then
And then
some more homes were tested.
Yeah,
Right.
and then what happened is that the the Zone A that they speak about in here was expanded.
Yeah.
So that's why there are additional homes now. But at the time that the ACO was drafted or created, I think there were only, I don't know the exact number, it might have been only about five to six, maybe 7 homes that were being tested at the time. And then the scope was expanded.
It was expanded to include Captain Perkins Drive and Hines Avenue.
Right.
Exactly.
So there wouldn't, under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be another ACO
No.
drafted to expand it? Okay, and again, I'm
Oh, and
all
again,
new to this, so.
keeping in mind, we're not asking DEP for them to put further legal restrictions on us. You know, that would really be incumbent upon DEP to seek to impose further legal requirements on the town. But again, in good faith, we're obviously going beyond the consent order requirements.
And I just say I'm not a voting member of this board, but I agree wholeheartedly with having the agreements in place. It makes perfect sense. And I say that because I sent that email out to 19 residents. Actually, I'll say 16. 3 of them I did not have email addresses, or they didn't have email addresses, and I hand-delivered them. One of the residents that I delivered it to, they're right across the street from 162 Plymouth Street, and they told me flat out, they are not tying in. So,
No, I think so too. I think it's important to have some type of agreement in place that we can offer to people. My only concern is if it becomes a holdup because someone's being told they have to decommission their well when DEP says they don't have to decommission their well. That's my concern there.
Right, and ultimately, all we can do is our part. That's all we can do.
Right.
And again, I appreciate Kevin reaching out this past week or two to those residents again.
So,
Mr. Hoffman.
So I guess, so Bob, your part A, the first one was to hook up to the water line and decommission your well.
Correct.
And then the second was,
To hook up to the water line and not decommission your well.
okay,
And the other one would be to not hook up at all, period.
so I guess, I don't know if the term, legally, whatever, if someone hooks up to the water line and then has their choice to either decommission the well or not decommission the well, what's the ultimate decision? Is it illegal that they have to?
That was my first point, was do we know legally?
Right.
Have that meeting, know it, and then,
Because if I was a homeowner and I wanted to water my lawn, I don't need, you know.
So Bob, you're
Again, I don't know.
suggesting that we
Might be
offer
wrong.
3 different agreements to folks? They can choose whether they can sign the agreement to decommission their well or sign the agreement not to decommission their well? Is that?
Yes, and then if the DEP wants to go after those people individually to decommission a well, let DEP do that. It's not up to the town at
right.
that point.
Okay, I agree.
I agree 100%. Further discussion of that.
So do I.
Let's be proactive, have those ready, and then it's after the meeting when hopefully DEP shows up. The homeowners can all do their homework and then figure out which way they go. But for us to try to do this after that meeting would just prolong it. I agree 100% with Bob. Let's get counsel. Let's get these things done up now.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. All right, so, Mr. LaFawn, can we, I think we need to put a priority on getting hold of DEP and finding out exactly where we stand here. And if you could get an update to the board as quickly as possible, I would appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay,
So one other quick thing.
Mr. Hoffman.
I just want to thank Kevin for all your work on this. I know it's been above and beyond, and I'm sure you've got a lot of feedback, both positive and negative. And I know I can speak with the rest of the board, but appreciate all the work you put in.
Absolutely, and I can say
Amen.
from the number of times I've communicated with Kevin in the last couple of weeks, I really appreciate all your help, Kevin.
appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. So our final item, we have a request to use town-owned property by the Church of the Vine for an ice cream social on August 26, 2021, from 5 to 7 p.m.
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, Bob?
Yes.
Mr. Belvin?
So this is for the use of
Shirtlift Park.
Trailer Park. And it's an ice cream social, and it's a school supply giveaway. And I would assume that's a school supply giveaway for the Carver students or whatnot. And for that reason, I wish to make a amendment to that motion to waive the fee. This is something for our kids in our town, and
But it's also being sponsored by the Church of the Vine, so they don't get it, because it's a church, they don't have a fee anyway.
they paid $50.
It does
It's
say
at the
right here
top.
that, I was going to question that as well. It does say that they paid $50.
Well,
So
the thing that we voted on quite some time ago was that the only people that pay to use Shirtlift, the people who do not pay to use Shirtlift Park are churches and nonprofits and town organizations like the Agricultural Commission. So,
that was my point, that it was,
Right.
that they receive $50.
so they should get their
They
$50.
should get their
Correct.
$50 back. Can we check and
So I'd
see?
like to make that amendment, that the $50 be removed.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to-
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you,
Sorry
everybody.
I was late, everyone. I apologize.
Okay, fine.
No problem.